Hey everyone, it's Justine. Welcome to a new video. And today we are going to be taking a deep dive into the BetterPress stamping versus stamping with traditional clear stamps. Now, I'm going to be using the same stamp set and its equivalent in BetterPress form to show you a few different ways that you can use your stamps and BetterPress, and we're going to compare them side by side so you can see truly what the difference is, how to use each one, which one I think is better, and then we're going to go into a few card examples. All right, let's dive in and get started. All right, first of all, what is the difference between a stamp set and a BetterPress set? So I grabbed both of these from Altenew. They're the exact same images on each one, so there's no need to invest in both of them. I just did it for the video educational purposes. You generally just need one or the other, whichever one your preference is. So both of these here obviously are from Altenew, and just so you know, if you place an order today over $79, you will get a free mini blending brush. Just use my link below in the description to be able to add that onto your order. Obviously on the right you have the clear stamps, and then on the left we have the BetterPress, which looks similar to die cuts, but they don't cut. They actually stamp and give you texture on your card at the same time. So let's dive into how to use each of these products, and then we'll compare them side by side. And like I said, we'll create a few cards together too, compare and contrast the techniques that are possible with each of these. So I think we're all pretty familiar at this point in time with clear stamps, so I'm not going to go into crazy detail, but you put your stamp down into a stamping positioner, or using an acrylic block, that works as well. You're going to ink up your stamp set and then you're going to stamp it. Now, because I'm using a really solid stamp, you may want to season your stamp first. And all that means is either stamp it a bunch of times on some copy paper, or you could actually kind of push your hand onto it and get some of the hand residue onto the stamp and then just wipe it with a microfiber cloth. Or you can also use a white eraser and just go over the stamp lightly. This just gets rid of any manufacturer's residue that might still be on the stamp. So once you ink it up and you press it down, you get an image that kind of looks like this. Now, there's not just solid images, obviously there's also lined images, so let's do a second layer on the top, and this way we'll get a nice design in on this stamp set. So when you stamp an image, it looks like this, and now I have my little sort of festive triangle or Christmas tree. So what does the BetterPress look like in comparison? So the BetterPress obviously requires some different tools. You have the BetterPress system here on the left, and you need a compatible die cutting machine, which I have on the right. I'm going to take my paper now, and I am going to line it up with the lines on this clear plate. You have an A2 size, or 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches to line up, or you could do 5 by 7 inches. It has both of those grid lines on there, and anything smaller or in between. So I'm going to tape this here to the platform itself using 4 pieces of removable adhesive on each of the corners. And then I'm going to place the BetterPress plate on top of the BetterPress platform. Now it works very similarly to a stamp. I'm going to grab one of my inks. I'm going to ink it up, and I am going to then place the platform directly on top. And what's really nice is it snaps into place with magnets. So similar to stamping with a stamping platform or a MISTI or whatever you're using, it could be the Altenew stamp wheel, it's going to stamp in the same place each time. So if you ever miss out on some ink on you don't ink it up well enough or anything like that, you can always go back in and restamp without any issues. So I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine, which is going to give it a nice even pressure through the machine. And 2 things happen. It doesn't just stamp, but it also adds a little bit of texture. Unfortunately, on video, you don't see the texture all that well. And the reason being is it's not like embossing folder texture, it's more subtle than that. But in real life, it is really pretty. So I'm going to place the next plate directly on top of where the old one was. With these grid lines, I find it pretty easy to line up where it needs to go. So I can stamp over top and add that detail. I'm going to do the same image as I did with the stamp set, so you can really see them side by side as to what the difference is. One thing I do find is you do want to wipe off any ink that gets on the platform while you're stamping. I did find that when it goes through the die cutting machine, it will rub off on the cardstock, so you want to make sure you're clean when working with this. All right, let's see what this did and then look at them side by side. So now you can see the detail. I used the exact same inks, the exact same paper. I just stamped on the right side, and on the left side, I used the BetterPress. Now you can see on the left side, you have far more detail than on the right side. Yes, they're both the same image. At the end of the day, does it make a massive difference in your card making? No, but I really like the crisp lines that the BetterPress gives you versus the stamping on the right that is a little less crisp. That's just a personal preference though. So what we're going to do now is create 3 cards together doing different techniques. We're going to compare them side by side with the BetterPress versus regular stamping, and then some of the techniques that you can do with BetterPress that you can't do with stamping. So let's dive into those. So let's do some stamping and let's overlap some of these trees too, just to see how that looks on stamping compared to the BetterPress. I'm using a piece of copy paper just to help me stay clean so that this dark color is not getting on the middle plate. And I am going to ink up each one of these trees with a different shade of blue. I love Altenew inks in the sense that they come in a 4-pack from light to dark so that all of these inks I know coordinate well together. And I will always link to the supplies used in the video description. Okay, so you can see how well these 3 stamped here, and we'll go into more closer detail in a second. Let's do the other plates. So I'm going to place the second layer here. We're going to overlap some of them, and I'm just going to slowly remove the ones in the center just so I can get everything lined up the way that I want to. And I'm going to go in with the lightest shade of blue this time and stamp over top of the previous colors. So I'm running that through my machine. And when I remove it from the machine, you're going to see all the beautiful details of these overlapping and show, I think the detail is just incredible. Very similar to red rubber stamps on how they used to be with the fine detail one. And I'm really loving that. Now, of course, it's not just about images, it's also about sentiments and things as well. How many of you stamp your sentiments and they're not as crisp as you'd like them to be? One of the beautiful things about the BetterPress is how gorgeous these sentiments look. So let's take a look at what those look like. So you can really see here the crispness of the sentiments. And like I said, I am going to stamp the exact same card very quickly though, because we all know how stamping works, and show you the difference between the two. And I find you can really see it in those fine details, especially text. Like I said, you do get that letterpress look too, where it's pushed into the cardstock, makes it look super professional. All right, I'm going to go through the stamping one very quickly here. Now, one of the things that I did notice when it came to the stamps, and of course, these are brand new stamps, so they do need to be seasoned probably better than what I did, but I did have to stamp each one of these at least twice in order to get a clear impression. Like I said, that is mainly because they're not quite seasoned yet, but you will see that some of the images are a little bit more faded compared to the BetterPress example. My sentiment, however, does stamp quite crisply, and I really like the way that it looks. So I did the exact same card. On the left is the BetterPress, on the right is the stamping job. And you can see that one is more clearer and more detailed than the other. While I set up my next card, which I'm going to be stamping with Versamark ink and doing some heat embossing to show you how that looks between the BetterPress and the stamping, I do want to make myself very clear on this. I am not saying that I like the BetterPress more than the stamp set. At the end of the day, they both do the job. They create a beautiful card and a beautiful image. So there's no reason to feel inferior about your stamp sets or anything like that. All right, let's take a look at how well this stamped. So now I can see that my plates here are stamping perfectly well, and I'm going to add some of the embossing powder on top. I'm going to make sure that all of the stray embossing powder is gone, although it doesn't really matter because I'm technically going to trim these out with some scissors. There are coordinating dies, but they were sold out when I picked up this set, so I didn't grab them. I let my heat tool preheat for about a minute before adding it to the cardstock, and you can see here it just goes super fast when it comes to heat embossing, and it looks really great when it is all embossed. What I do find, however, is that when you're heat embossing, because embossing powder does have a texture to it, you kind of lose that BetterPress or that letterpress detail. I can't really tell that there's that indentation or that texture from the plate itself when it's heat embossed, like I can tell when it's stamped. So at the end of the day, that kind of goes away. Now, when it comes to sentiments, Same idea, we're going to do the exact same thing as we did before, so I'm going to do that off screen just to save a little bit of time here. And when I heat emboss it, you can see you get that crispness like you do with the stamping. I find it looks really beautiful and it's all ready for a card. We'll take a look at that in closer detail in just a second. I just wanted to make my own gold cardstock that matched the embossing that I just did. So I'm just grabbing some embossing ink or Versamark ink, and I'm adding some powder here to the sides because I only am creating a frame, so I don't need to do the whole piece of cardstock. I'm going to heat all of that up, and then I'm going to just glue it as layers onto my card. And then I can add in all of these Christmas trees as well as the happy holiday stamping there. You can see it in better detail as to how crisp everything turned out. And like I said, we're going to make the exact same card with stamping to see side by side if there's a big difference when it comes to heat embossing or not. So let's take a look at this final card here. I love the shine on it. And we're going to do the exact same thing with stamping. So all you're going to do is grab everything that you need to be stamped. I'm going to do it all at once. All of the trees as well as the sentiment. I don't need to do all of them this time. Sometimes I like to stamp out all the stamps so I have some variety when I'm putting together the card. But once I have my final design, then I'm good to go and I don't need to stamp all of those extra trees. Adding the embossing powder over top, I'm using the same ink, the same powder, the same heat tool, the same cardstock. Everything's the same except for one's using the stamp and one's using the BetterPress plate. And I'm just going to heat this up and let's compare them side by side. Funny enough, as I'm putting this card together, I'm kind of liking the look of having a little bit of a thicker line detail that this gives me versus the BetterPress. Let me know in the comments below which one you find better. On the right, we have the BetterPress example. On the left, we have the stamping. Overall, there's not a massive difference, I find, when you have the heat embossing. And I can definitely not tell the difference as easily as I can when it comes to just simple stamping techniques. So I think my conclusion is for heat embossing, it doesn't matter if you have the stamp or the BetterPress plate. All right, as I'm sitting here editing this video, I kind of realized I didn't say my opinion on which one I find better. Now, I just want to say right off the hop that I don't find stamping to be inferior to the BetterPress. Yes, the BetterPress, I think, stamps more crisply and in detail, but stamps are just fine the way that they are. So when you have a choice between the two of them, it really is your decision at the end of the day, whether or not you think the price difference between the stamp set and the BetterPress plate is worth it. Keeping in mind, of course, that the BetterPress plates can also hot foil. So if you do own the hot foil, glimmer foil machine system thingy, then you can also use your BetterPress plates with the hot foil machine, which gives them an additional function, which I really love. So I have to say, like, if I find the price difference between the stamp set and the BetterPress plate to be within a $10 range, then oftentimes, and I know it's a stamp or a set, an image set that I'm gonna use really quite often, then I don't mind spending the extra few dollars on the BetterPress plate. When it comes to stamping though, it definitely still has its place. There's still a lot of techniques that you can do that, maybe it would be more difficult with the BetterPress itself. But overall, and I think really exact perfect placement of stamps is a little bit easier with stamping and the MISTI and the clear stamp system than the BetterPress system. So I thought I'd just give my opinion in that sense, and hopefully that's helpful. And I think the video here is really self-explanatory as to, the pros and cons of each one. So if you have any questions at all, throw them in the comments. I'm happy to answer and give my opinion on them, but that's kind of my opinion on the BetterPress plate system. Now, one of the things that I really enjoy doing as well is adding in the BetterPress plates and just really focusing on that texture. Like I said before, it can be quite difficult to see what kind of texture you're getting with the BetterPress plates on camera. And so I think doing this technique, it's going to show you that exact detail, because what we're doing is we're not adding ink at all. We are just using these to add texture to a background. So let's run this through the machine with no ink at all, just the way that it is. And I am going to just make a plea to companies. I personally would rather have 2 of the E's and have 1 less tree, for example, in my stamp set than have to kind of maneuver everything on my card and try and figure out where the second E is going to be. That's just my personal opinion. I know allows you to have an extra image by having to reuse the E, but I find it the double the work, and I'd rather just have all of the letters needed for a sentiment. That's just my personal opinion. Again, let me know in the comments if you agree. I think anybody who's a company that's looking at this might think and change their mind about how they design stamps and BetterPress plates if they see what people's preferences are. All right, let's take a look at the final design so you can see here what kind of texture you get when it comes to the BetterPress plates. And I think the detail is super pretty. That white on white, I love it, but of course you could do it on colored cardstock or anything you like. Next up, I'm gonna grab a die set that cuts out a bunch of little frames so that we can really make the card come together. This is one of my favorite die sets of all time. It's years and years old. I've had these for a million years, but I love it because it creates this really fine detail frame around the card that I think is really beautiful. And you get so many of them, you really pick and choose which one you think looks best. Now, just a heads up, I'm not doing a stamping equivalent of this because if I were to just stamp the piece onto the background and not use any sort of inks, then nothing would happen, right? And I can't run stamps through a die cutting machine. So this is one of those techniques that you really can't do unless you have the BetterPress. So I've gone ahead and trimmed down this background to the frames and I'm adding it to my card base now. This is a very white on white, clean and simple card. And I thought I would add a couple more details here. Originally, I had thought that I was going to emboss this in gold and add a gold tree and a gold sentiment to the card. But then what I ended up realizing when I added the powder was that the texture was so beautiful, why not just keep them white? Which I know is a little hard to see on screen, but overall, I'll show you in a second what the card looks like. It's beautiful. All right, so just adding the sentiment on top, and now we have this really white on white card, lots of dimension with some foam tape. It looks fantastic. It's all done with texture, not with stamping or any color at all. And you can see what great looks you can get with this as well. So once again, let's recap the cards we created. We created one with stamping. We created one with heat embossing. And then the last one we created with just the BetterPress, which was full of texture. So I hope this was a helpful explanation to stamping versus the BetterPress, and now you can make a great informed decision about which one's best for you.